this looks.
It doesn't look bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Neale Godfrey, and I am so pleased to be doing the training today on the Ultimate Kids Money Book. So in front of you, you should have an Ultimate Kids Money Book and an Ultimate Kids Money Book Tutor Guide. What I want you to do is to first flip through the Ultimate Kids Money Book. You're going to see that it is a very robust book that basically teaches your students through the use of trivia, meaning that there are no lessons in here that extend more than a few pages. The kids are going to learn what the world was like before there was money, why we have money around the world, and then they're going to move into real economic tools. Learning about banks, credit cards, debit cards, all uses of credit. Why do we have mortgages? Why do we pay interest on mortgages? How does interest work for us in a savings account? How does interest work against us when we actually borrow money? What's a credit report? Why are all those things important, and how this works around the world? We're also then going to talk a little bit about stock. And the end of the book talks about how companies raise money. They either borrow money or they issue stock, which means that you as an investor can take advantage of whether they do well or the disadvantage of if they don't do very well. Then we're going to talk a little bit about taxes and the government and why we pay taxes and what those taxes are for. What you as a teacher and instructor are going to do is use the Tutor's Guide to make sure you help the kids better connect the world of learning with the actual world of doing. So the activities are very interactive. The kids should keep their own journal, and you can expand the lessons in any way that you want. So the first thing to do is make sure that you're familiar with the Ultimate Kids Money Book. Pick out the lessons and the words that you would like the kids to know and learn. Now what I want you to do is turn to your Tutor's Guide and open it up, and you'll see how it is constructed. Let me first give you a little bit of a background on me. As I said, my name is Neale Godfrey, and I have been working with kids and with money for the last 40 years. And I actually started the topic of kids and money while I was president of the first Women's Bank and opened up the first Children's Bank at FAO Schwartz in 1988 and an Institute for Youth Entrepreneurship up in Harlem to bring at-risk kids into the economy, to give them the tools that they need to make the choices that they want about their careers and their life. I started writing books, and it's kind of scary, but I actually have 27 books today. And I also have interactivity for kids through gaming with 2 educational video gaming apps called Green Street's Schmutz Happens. Let me introduce you to Schmutz, by the way. Here's my buddy. Schmutz creates problems in a village called Green Streets, and it doesn't matter who creates the problems. Together we all have to solve them, whether they're economic or ecological. Okay, back to our Tutor's Guide. Open up your Tutor's Guide, and I want you to turn to page 1. This is an overview for you to teach you how to use the guide and the Ultimate Kids Money Book. You're going to see that there are critical thinking questions called A Penny for Your Thoughts. Take a look at them. These questions allow your students to think about and apply the knowledge that they are learning to their real world. I want you to bring in examples that you can bring in also from your everyday existence and the things that the kids do environmentally with themselves when they're in the store, when they're buying things, when they're online, when they're researching the cost of goods. There's something else in there called a matter of fact. These are going to be interesting, noteworthy lists, and I want the kids to start expanding their own. Let them see what they would like to talk about, matter of fact. Maybe they compare the cost of sneakers. Maybe they're talking about the cost of new electronics. Maybe they're talking about buying online versus going into a store, using coupons, making a list, keeping a budget. Those are the things that we want our kids to come out with learning. There's also going to be a word bank, which is a list of words, definitions, and vocabulary that you want the kids to start using and be familiar with. I have some examples. There are examples in the Ultimate Kids Money book. Build your own. Let the kids come up with ideas of words that they would like to learn. What is the Dow? You can find that in my book. Why is it important? What about recession? They hear these words every single day, but they don't know what they mean. Inflation. What does that mean? The cost of goods, tuition, financial aid. Let these kids get involved with the definitions of the words that are going to affect their lives. Take your pick is also something that I have in here. These are problem-solving scenarios. I want the kids to use their critical thinking skills to start building a budget, start learning how to fill out a job application. What are the things that are going to influence their life? Make sure that the lessons you teach are age appropriate. You will know that as the teacher or instructor. The big thing is with the Ultimate Kids Money book, I want you to pick out the pages and the chapters that are going to be appropriate for what you're doing. The book is very, very robust. You have to tailor make it to the lessons and the themes that you are teaching. There's also going to be an assessment that I'd like you to do in terms of having the kids do pre and post, if this is appropriate for your learning situation. There are activity sheets within this book, the Tutor's Guide. If the kids have enough of the Tutor's Guide, you can have them take that home, or you can actually make copies of it so that they can use it and use as activity sheets within your lessons, or take them home and think about them, and they can even work with them with their parents or guardians. I want you to turn to page 2. Money. Who needs it? This section is going to get the kids familiar with money. You're going to ask your students provocative questions like, what is money? Why do we need it? Why do we use it? What you want to do is have the kids come up with their own ideas. The big reason is money is a medium of exchange. I don't care if the kids know those specific words. What I want them to understand is that money represents value, meaning we use pieces of money and paper and coins in exchange to get goods and services that we want. I want the kids to understand the words goods and service, and that's how you're going to start to explain this to the kids. A good is something tangible that they actually can buy, sneakers, a table, an iPad, and services are things like being a bus driver or a doctor or a nurse or a lawyer. So in life, we pay and use money as a medium of exchange to buy the things we want, the goods, and the services that we want also. Let them start understanding those words. The kids are going to also discover how we got things long time ago, before there was money. And the way we got things is we bartered for it. Meaning that if I had something that you wanted and you had something that I wanted, we could swap for that. Ask the kids about that. They know that when they grew up, that's how they got things that they wanted on the playground. I'll swap my peanut butter and jelly sandwich for that cool sticker that you have. That's how people did it tens of thousands of years ago. But you know what? If I didn't want your peanut butter and jelly sandwich and it was gushy, it has no value for me. But if I'm really, really hungry, that peanut butter and jelly sandwich has a lot of value. Same thing happened tens of thousands of years ago. But wouldn't it make it easier if I had a product with a price tag on it and I knew what the value was? The answer? Yes. That's why money was invented. And you'll go through that with your kids. And you know what people did? They use lots of different things for money. They use salt and sugar and the teeth of animals and axes. And you want to hear the grossest thing they used for money? They used dead rats. It wasn't that easy to barter with that. So that's what you're going to do and teach the kids. Make it interesting, make it fun. And talk to them about what different people used for money. When our settlers first came to the United States, the Native Americans were using wampum. Wampum? Well, were just shells. And they had a value that people had gotten together and decided that this is what it was worth in exchange for something else. So actually, the exchange for Manhattan Island was about $24 worth of wampum. By the way, it looks like that the settlers outsmarted the Native Americans. Actually, they didn't. The Native Americans outsmarted the people coming in from Europe. Because the fact of the matter is that Native Americans didn't own land. They used land. So actually, they bartered for something they didn't own. So you can tell the kids, actually, the Native Americans were smarter than the Europeans coming over here. So your kids are going to start learning about value and how long ago value was set in the marketplace and how it really still is set in the marketplace today. They have to look at competitive pricing. If you decide that your ice cream cone is really fabulous and that you want to sell that for $25 an ice cream cone, is that value that somebody is going to pay for in the marketplace? I don't think so. Let them do market research to see what an average ice cream cone is valued at. What would somebody pay for that? And maybe the top cost would be $3 a cone. So the value that you've placed on the cone for $25 isn't going to fly. That's how value is still set in the marketplace. What somebody can get that identical or close to product for a similar price. That's how value is set today. Then the kids are going to also try to learn definition of words. And I want you to make sure you write them down, spell them for the children, go through the definitions, and make sure they understand how and why they're used. You get to pick the words that you want to use in this curricula. So you should be saving these words for the kids. They should be writing them down in their journal. They should be using them in their language, and they should learn how to also use them in writing. Again, this is going to be interactive for you. The activity that you can also do with the kids that you're going to find in the Tutor's Guide is money bingo. Why are we doing that? Why are we creating bingo cards that have money in them? Most kids, sadly enough, don't know how to make change, don't know how to count money, and aren't really familiar with it. In fact, we did a survey many years ago and found out that 2/3 of our kids between the ages of 12 and 17 actually throw change away. Why? Because they don't see any value in it. Let's make sure that our kids know how to count change, know how to make change, are empowered to make change when they're in the store, and also become familiar with the value of the coins. So Money Bingo is a lesson that you're going to find in here also. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to start teaching these kids about budgeting. Turn to page 3 in your Tutor's Guide and you'll see a lesson on that. What is a budget? A budget is money in and money out. And we hope that what we're teaching our kids is that the money in exceeds the money out. So the money you're receiving through salaries, through gifts, through welfare, through allowance, exceeds the money that you're paying for goods and services. So what I want you to do is start teaching the kids the skills to build their own budget. There are questions in here that you're going to teach the kids and question them and evoke responses from the children. That's going to be your responsibility as the instructor. Why are budgets important? The answer? Budgets help a person or a business or an organization to track the money that they have coming in and that they want to spend in the future. It's a plan. It gives you a roadmap. It's something to follow. So then what you're going to do is actually help the kids to build their own budgets. If you turn to page 4 in the Tutor's Guide, you're going to see how the kids can start building a budget and tracking their own budget. I want them to set up a fake budget so they can start figuring out what money looks like coming in through salary and through gifts, and what it could be in terms of a spending plan. Again, tailor-make it to your kids to make sure that it fits their level of sophistication. Then you're going to see the money bingo. Play with them and do that. And you can do money bingo over and over again. That can be something you can do at the end of a lesson because they enjoy it and it's fun. Make sure that you have a pile of coins that the kids can use, because I want them to use real coins for money bingo. Turn to page 5. This teaches all about banks. In the Ultimate Kids Money book, there's a whole area in Check It Out that you're going to see teaches the kids about banks. I want them to learn about the banking system, why we have a banking system, how the system works, and that banks actually are a tool for us. They supply a service. They keep our money safe, and they give it back to us when we want it. And the banks use our money to help other people to buy homes and for businesses, and they charge us when we borrow money from them. We call that interest. And unfortunately, we also call it interest that they pay us, a bank pays us, to use our money so they can lend it out. But explain to the kids that a bank rents money from us. They don't actually buy the money. Meaning, when you rent something, if you go rent a car for a day, you have to pay for the use of that car, but you have to give it back. That's what happens with the money. The bank rents the money from us, they pay us a fee, and then at the end, they give us our money back. So we're going to teach the kids simple interest. There's a problem in here where you can start, and the math is worked out for you, teaching simple interest. What you can do is also tell the kids, go out and find out what your local bank is paying interest on different types of accounts. You'll learn in the Ultimate Kids Money book what a simple savings account is, what a money market account is, what a CD, which is a certificate of deposit, is. You're going to read those sections to the kids or have them read it themselves and then discuss it. Send them out in real life and find out what interest rates they could get. We're also then going to teach these kids about mortgage rates. If you buy a home, the bank actually owns that home until you pay off the whole loan. The loan to get your home is called a mortgage, and there's a rate on that. So what you're going to do is I have simple mortgage rates that you can teach the kids. Again, you'll find the problems in the Ultimate Kids Money book. Read it to the kids. Let them do role playing. One can be the banker, one can be the person coming in to get a home mortgage. Am I going to lend you more money than your home's worth if I'm the bank? I don't think so. Ask the kids about that. And also ask them what other fees would have to be charged when they get that home mortgage. There's going to have to be insurance on the house. If something happens to the house, I as a bank want to make sure I'm getting it back. So there are all sorts of other areas you can ask the kids. Again, make sure you do it based upon the sophistication of the children. The other thing I want the kids to learn about is a checking account. Before they use electronics, using their debit card, I want to make sure they understand what a check is. A check allows you to put money into a banking account and write a check to pay someone else for something that you buy. So rather than carrying cash around, you can actually let the bank supply that service for you. Why would you use a check? You use a check because you don't have to carry cash. It's safer. And only you, who are the signer on that check, can have access to that money. If your checks are lost or stolen, only you can actually use that money. So it's safer for you. There is a fee for using that the bank will charge. Let the kids go research what some of those fees are. Again, you're going to make sure that they look up the section that's appropriate in the Ultimate Kids Money book. Either you're going to read it to them or they're going to find it out for themselves. Then I want the kids to practice writing their own checks. And on page 7, you're going to see some problems that the kids can work out mathematically. They wrote 2 checks. They're keeping a check register. They're checking fees. I want to make sure when they keep that check register, they have the amount that they put into the bank, the amount that they're writing the checks against, the fees have to be out, and then they're going to find basically what is left over, which is still their available balance. They're also going to learn about ATMs and how you can get money out of the bank. Again, it's a service that the bank provides, and they're going to charge you for that service. There's also something called a debit card, which is an electronic card that debits automatically, like a check would, from your checking account. Talk to the kids about the pros and cons of that. We're also going to teach the kids some everyday use of money, like tipping. Talk to the kids about what a tip is, how it works, how, if you went to a restaurant, what would be an appropriate tip. Normally in the United States, people tip between 10 and 20%. It's a wonderful way to teach these kids percentages through everyday use. Teach them how to do 10%. Teach them how to do 15%. Teach them how to do 20%. Let them start being aware of good service and bad service and why we do that. Also on page 9, you're going to see that we're going to start teaching the kids about credit cards. I want them to know that credit is a privilege and not a right. Meaning, you have to show the bank that you are responsible. Meaning that you pay your bills on time, that you have a job, you earn income, and that there's a reason they should trust you giving you credit. Credit is borrowing money. The bank charges you for that fee, and they charge you more than they would if they were giving you other services. Why would that be the case? Ask your students. The reason is because if I lend you $20, I'm going to charge you money for that because I'm at risk if you don't pay that money back. And you are going and using that credit card to buy goods and services at other places. I have to trust that you're going to pay me back because if you don't pay me back, I, the bank, am liable for that. That means I have to pay it back. I have to trust you that you're going to be responsible. I report how you're doing with that credit card to what we call credit service places. And those places are recording your credit score. Each one of us has a credit score. I want the kids to know that I, as the bank, will be watching how you're handling it. If you pay me on time, you will have a good credit score, which means that in the future, you're going to be able to get more credit and maybe buy a house and maybe buy a car and maybe have more credit to get credit cards. If you're not responsible, I'm going to record that to the credit service places and you will have a bad credit score, which means you may not have access to more credit, or if you do, you're going to pay more interest on that service. So it's very important that the kids start to learn that too. On page 11 of the guide, I teach the kids how to fill out a bank account application form. This is something that's going to be their first entree into the real world of banking. In order to get a credit card, in most cases you need to first have a savings account and have some money built up in that. So I want the kids to go through how to actually fill out a real bank account application. Then what I want you to turn to page 12 of the Tutor's Guide. We're going to talk a little bit about employment and unemployment and how they are going to get their first job and some of the things around getting the job, being responsible, handling money, starting to pay bills, starting to build a budget. That's the whole purpose of what we're doing here. I want them also to start building a real budget that they would have to keep in real life. And what we do is just start with the trip to the supermarket. What are some of the things they have to think about in terms of building a real budget? What's the cost of milk? What about a pound of apples? What about a 6-pack of soda? How about a bottle of shampoo? Let them see what a real budget would look like and what they'd have to build. Then, on page 13, I want them to know if they get that first job, they're going to be paying taxes. I want you to have the conversation around taxes. When we hear the word taxes, most of us grumble. But the fact of the matter is, taxes pay for a lot of the services that we use, including schools, police people, fire people, roads, bridges, dams, tunnels, lots of services that we have, hospitals. So I want you to have a challenge with the kids to look around and talk about what taxes pay for and what they don't pay for, and why we all have to do it. If we drive on a road, shouldn't we all be paying for that? If I have an emergency and I call for an ambulance, don't you think that we want that ambulance to show up? Or the police department, or the fire service. If we didn't have taxes, if we didn't have these services in our economy, what would happen? Suppose we didn't have teachers. Suppose we didn't have the park service to keep our parks clean. What would happen to our society? So I want you to really talk about that. Go into the Ultimate Kids Money book, read about that, and let the kids learn. What you're going to do is to put them in different scenarios. A 15% tax bracket, let them figure out what they would have to pay, on up to a 36% tax bracket, and explain what that is. Then you're going to end these sessions with money around the world. I want them all to understand how we are connected economically on a global basis. I buy what you sell, and you sell what I buy. And we are a global economy. Most of our clothing is made someplace else. I want them to look at the labels inside their clothing and find out where those clothes are made. And I want them to think about how those clothes are paid for. I also want them to think about if something is made in America and the money stays in this economy here, how that benefits us. When something is made in a foreign country, let's say China, and I'm buying that clothing here and paying for it in dollars, it has to be ultimately paid, the money has to be shipped back to China. So when the money gets shipped back to China, and those workers in China are now benefiting from that, they are now using that money to buy goods and services in China. If I bought clothing that was made in America, where is that money going? It's staying here in America for the workers to buy goods and services here. How does that affect the different economies? I want them to start thinking about that. I also want them to also start thinking about investing in the stock market. First, I want them to understand the reason there is a stock market. And the reason there's a stock market is because when companies are formed, they sometimes don't have enough money to start their business. They can either borrow money from a bank, or they can issue stock and sell a little piece of their company to other people. If their company does well, they will share some of those profits. Those are called dividends. Or if you decide to sell that stock, and I've done really well with my company, the stock price should go up. And that means that you benefit from that if you sell it. So if you bought the stock at $1, I did really well, and lots of people want to buy that stock, and the demand and value in the marketplace drove the stock up, and you sold it for $2, you made $1 gain on that stock. So I want the kids to start understanding what the stock market is and how it works. And that's all in the Ultimate Kids Money book. What I want you to make sure is that you make it fun and interesting for the kids. I want the world to be their classroom. I want you to start understanding how the world works. I want you to start sharing that knowledge with the kids. Make it fun, make it interesting, make it interactive. Let them buy something and bring their receipt in and talk about what is on the receipt. The money that they gave, in terms of what the cost was, maybe there was tax on that. Why are some goods and services taxed? It's another way that the government can earn money. Start, again, making sure that you connect what the